Hello, CogX. I'm super sorry not to be there in person, but I brought Ginger Rogers, oh, she's that side, to be able to sing and dance in the background in case we need to have a technical hitch or anything. So it's lovely to see you all, and thank you so much for joining this session. I'm absolutely thrilled to have the chance to have a long conversation with a woman who is influencing the digital world so profoundly and has done so much for all of us who believe that we need to do more to build a digitally responsible world. Margrethe Vestager is a Danish politician, and she's currently in the von der Leyen Commission serving as the Executive Vice President for a Europe fit for the digital age. She's been doing that since 2019. She works in the Competition Commission as well, and is absolutely at the heart of how Europe is thinking about both regulating for the digital age, but also building products and services for the digital age. Now, I've chatted to Margrethe a few times, but I've never actually met her. So this is going to continue our extended virtual conversation. And I'd love to bring her in right now and start our conversation, I guess, with, hello, Margrethe.
Hello. And I'm really happy to be here with you, but you're right to say that we really ought to get to know each other in person.
Face to face. Lunch, we'll definitely have lunch sometime, or you're very welcome to my karaoke bar, Margrethe. I don't know if it's something that appeals to you, but I think we should go for a sing-song. The last year, no surprises, my committee in the House of Lords has done some work on this as well, has really accelerated through so many trends that perhaps we saw happening before. And I'm interested in whether it's sort of changed your view of what a digitally fit for purpose Europe or world feels like.
Well, I think we've all had the same thing, a lot of digital, while looking at all the many people who didn't have that chance to make sure that there was still food on the shelves, and that the garbage was taken away, and obviously all the people working in hospitals. So on the one hand side, seeing a divide between those of us who can do everything digital and the fundamentals in our lives that still will have to be physical. Just take all the transport workers who has been there to be delivering goods that has been done, ordered on e-commerce. So I have this feeling that, yes, digital has enabled, but we're still very much, of course, in the hands of those who are physically present. And the second thing is that just as much as I admire and feel extremely privileged that we were able to continue so many things, working, socializing, exercising, doing our shopping, all of that. I also think that we have seen the boundaries to what tech can do for us. I didn't lose my smell and taste when I had COVID, but I may have lost my sense of humor, because you don't really get this.
Yeah.
Because humor is in the timing, and I find it really difficult to negotiate, to brainstorm. Everything that should take you out of your comfort zone is really difficult. So I think we have learned a lot, but we have also learned to see the limitations of technology.
I think that's really interesting about taking out of your comfort zone. I agree with you. I've started chairing a company, Wetransfer, only ever met people digitally, and you just can't quite get that cultural kind of understanding if you're not walking around chatting to people, looking and feeling how things are operating. I think the other thing, as you've sort of alluded to, is we have now really seen the digital divide in all its forms. This last year has shown so much about children's ability to be educated online, you know, whether people have access to smartphones, whether people have access to computers, and also just then more broadly, the kind of digital skills that we need to function. How are you thinking about making sure that in this Europe fit for purpose, we don't leave people behind? And I don't just mean that kind of binary choice of access or no access. I mean the kind of more sophisticated gradients of understanding this digital world.
It's actually, it's a hard strategic goal for us. It's not sort of, this soft thing, oh, but education is always good, education, yeah, all of that, No, it's a hard strategic choice to pursue that everyone can get both basic digital skills, but also basic skills in sort of a broader understanding as to what is skills actually. So, and this is not for children alone. I just want to ask the people hosting us here if the sound is all right, because I hear myself, and that is only, yeah, not so good. So, do you hear me well?
Yes, I hear you great.
Okay, excellent.
Okay.
No, but my point was to say that this is not only for children and young people. This is for people of all ages. Because if you're in your 70s today, you have 20 more years, give or take, and the world will digitalize a lot in those 20 years. So even if you do not feel comfortable digital-wise right now, you should dig in, because otherwise the next 20 years you might get to feel really estranged from the world that you live in. And my last point would be that we need to integrate digital much more in other things we do, because a lot of people are not really passionate about having digital skills. They are passionate about their gardening or farming or being, a traffic controller or a building constructor or trying to save the planet by energy efficiency. And all of those places, we need digital skills to come in, because then you get it to be a tool to help you with something that you're passionate about.
Completely agree. Using that lever of what the motivation is for
Yes.
a different person. Do you feel confident that when you think about a kind of 10-year horizon, that we will have closed this gap, both in the kind of people who have access and don't, that binary thing, but then also, as you say, the more sophisticated levels of digital understanding? Do you feel optimistic about this?
Well, I think with we have this Next Generation EU, where we have a recovery and resilience fund, where the point is not just to sort of restore what we had back 2019, but actually to push ahead. So 20% of these funds, in total 670 billion euros, they are for digital. So member states are investing heavily in connectivity, in e-governance, in skills, in enabling businesses to digitalize. So I do think that we can make it, but we also have to encourage one another that getting digital skills is a real thing for your social life, for your working life, for our democracy. Because if we do not embrace technology as citizens, then it will continue to be a somewhat, I think, cold push rather than something that we use to develop our society.
Yes. And a very important part of that, in my opinion, is then the kind of digitization of the public sector. Because, if you look, we talked about education, if you look at the amount of children in the UK, well, who did not have access to good equipment, that was one part of the puzzle, but the other part was the schools or the teachers that were unable to provide the services and the lessons and the lesson plans. A very significant programme to help policymakers, legislators, people working in the public sector also have the skills for the future.
Yes, I think you're very right to say that the pandemic showed how children are divided. Can they connect? Do they have the hardware? Did they have teachers who were prepared to take their education from the classroom and into a virtual room? And have they learned so that they can do more sort of blended learning in the future, have a more digital classroom, but also sometimes still to do remote learning. And I'm really impressed by a lot of people in the teacher community, some who had never done remote teaching before, to take this on board and learn by doing every day. But I think we owe them quite a lot to be there with support, with programs, with peer-to-peer learning experiences, and obviously with the resources in order to have the right equipment. Because the hardware is also part of this, not only in connectivity, but also the hardware that you have available actually to make it happen.
How good would you say the digital understanding of your colleagues in the European Commission is? Has it shown also the gap in understanding and ability amongst the people you work with? I have been amazed how quickly my Parliament, the House of Lords, jumped online. If you'd said that to me a year ago, I thought you would have been smoking dope, that we would all be using these to vote and so on. So how have you felt the Commission itself has responded digitally?
Well, I think the Commission was actually really digital before, sometimes also difficult, but that's another matter. Our president, she has shown this really strong leadership from the very first day, that she wanted college meetings without paper. So we have a dedicated tablet with all our papers for the college meeting. And then you can leave out your personal phone and your personal tablet, so you don't have that distraction. So we were sort of guided already way before the pandemic to be much more digital than we would otherwise have been. And from the very first day of the pandemic, we have been working, having our meetings in a digital format, but also worked with our teams who have now been working remotely since March last year. So really an enormous challenge, but also the efforts made, and it has been so impressive to see the productivity. Not only has it been, stable, I think it has gone up, because there's been so much work, and our teams have been able to do that while sitting in each of their homes, dealing with dogs and children and even spouses, and yet delivering. I'm really, really impressed.
Well, I agree with you. I've been inspired how these institutions have got over the inertia to be able to work digitally. I find it really unbelievable in some ways. One of the things that I personally have found quite uncomfortable in this, as everyone, I've been frenziedly doing all the shopping online every day, more and more packages arriving at my home, whether it's food or whether it's clothes, whatever it might be, stuff for the kids. I have been a frenzied Amazon customer through this last period of time. It strikes me that Amazon has provided the infrastructure for a huge amount of the country to be able to survive in the UK. And that makes me kind of nervous. I mean, taking apart the size of the company and all of the things that you've been dealing with, just in terms of the actual infrastructure of how we now operate, do you feel as though now we need to think a different way about what is provided in the public sphere and what is private? Has this last year changed any of your views beyond the kind of size of the company, I guess?
Well, one of the things coming from exactly this experience is actually, I think, on the positive note, more innovation.
Yeah.
When I was a child, you could have your groceries delivered. Then there was a 40-year break where you had to do everything yourself. And then all of a sudden, it's back big time.
Yeah.
That you can have things delivered, which I think is a really helpful convenience for families of all sizes, with children, without children, that you don't have to go shopping. And that, I think, is part of the innovation that the Amazon success has provoked. The second thing is, of course, that we need to figure out how to make sure that we still have living cities.
Yes.
that we figure out what is the brick and mortar experience. When you would want to go to look at things, to feel them, to have an experience together, to have lively cities,
Yes.
because that we will not have if everything goes online. On the contrary, and that will be really, really sad. It will be even worse than when city shopping moved out in the big shopping malls. So I think we have food for thought. Actually, we are looking right now at our virtual block exemption regulation, sort of competition-wise, to see how to make sure that there can be a small sort of privilege for those who also wants to do brick and mortar. Because it's really important that we still have a physical infrastructure when it comes to shopping.
Absolutely. And one of the things in our select committee we looked at, we asked the country, the UK, what they felt the long-term implications of this last year would be. And we had a phenomenal response. We had poems, pictures, all kinds of things. And one of the key themes that came out was about the built environment and both the relationship to nature and all the access to green space, as you're saying, but also then a concern about the high street, what it looks like, how we can reimagine those shared spaces. So I feel excited that there's a potential to kind of reimagine our smaller towns and cities if we're creative about it and help them with the resourcing and so on. Could be a real opportunity. I guess one of the other sort of themes coming out of the last year is that people perhaps are talking, having now relied so heavily on technology, that some of our anxieties about it, of course, have become more pronounced because we've all spent so much time using technology, but the kind of noise around the tech clash that was very, deafening a couple of years ago has somewhat subsided. How do you see that? Do you perceive that's the case, or do you think people are still feeling very anxious about the companies and their size?
Well, I think instead of feeling anxious, there is a feeling of let's take action. And it's not just a European thing. It seems also to be a very global thing. When I were at the G7 digital ministers meeting, we had people coming in from Japan, from South Africa, pretty much from all over the world, and there was a sense of not only a shared agenda of things that you need to do, but also a shared sense of we need to take action, because it's at least in Europe, and I think that's pretty much the case all over the world, you're more than welcome to be successful, also big time successful. But with success comes responsibility, and that responsibility is not really lifted these days, both in order to keep the marketplace open and contestable, but also when it comes to being the host of our democratic dialogue. Also here you have a responsibility. So I think things have changed quite a lot over the last 5 years, but really accelerated by the pandemic. That we will not make the same legislation in every jurisdiction, but I think the things we do will have the same direction. It will be the same guiding principles, also because we realize that actually there is something fundamental at stake in our democracies, because geopolitically we also have the systemic rivalry with countries who are not democracies. And that I felt as a really strong change that has come around.
I agree absolutely, and I reflect a lot on one of the big shifts I think in the last 5 years beyond the rise of the monopolies we're talking about is clearly the role of China. Our liberal Western, if you want to characterize it that way, liberal internet versus the closed internet of other countries. And it's well documented about the way it's been balkanized. Arguably, you've got Facebook creating an internet, you've got China creating an internet, Russia shutting down the internet. I was reading that actually last year, in 2020, more countries closed down internet access than any other year in history. I mean, the numbers might be slightly off, but even if you have that as a sort of idea, that's quite unbelievable, actually, when you think about how much stuff has been done online. How do you, the themes of China and the rise of China's investment in AI, particularly, is I know a big theme for this conference. How do you think about China, and how do you think about that kind of parallel internet?
We need an alliance of democracies. We really need to assert ourselves for democratic values to underpin the standards of technology. And the reason why I say an alliance of democracies is that in a democracy, the integrity, the dignity of each and every one is the starting point. Not that the states have a right to decide and do the surveillance as to what we're doing. And I think it's really important that we get this right. That we do not accept technology used for social scoring by the state. That we do not accept sort of continuing biometric identification in public space. That I also find really, really intrusive. That we also, when it comes to using biometrics, that the integrity of the individual is a starting point, that you own yourself. So I think we are making really important choices these days as to whether we can overcome our differences as democracies to do this together. And we have great democracies all over the planet talking about the same thing. Take India, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the US, Canada. And of course, there are areas where we do not see eye to eye. But I think fundamentally, we're really, really, really on the same page.
Change this? Would you say the Biden administration has changed this global cooperation? Have you seen a shift since the arrival of a new American administration?
Yes, I have seen a shift. We are just the day before the EU-US summit, and we will launch the Trade and Technology Council. But I saw it also already before Biden took office, that the discussion in the US had changed. I think very much because of a number of different reasons. One of them being Susanna Zuboff and her writing, the realization of the ease at which you're being lured down a rabbit hole, the polarization effects of some social media. So I think it was well underway, but the fact that the Biden administration they act upon it, that is what is really, really encouraging.
So linking back to a point we were talking about before, do you feel when you look at the legislators around the world, and you're talking about the democracies coming together, and we had the recent G7 announcements about tax and so forth, do you feel that legislators are well equipped to deal with the complexities of the issues we're talking about? Are you confident that we will reach the kinds of agreements that you describe?
That's a really tricky question, because democracy by nature is slow. Because we talk, we try to understand info, we make plans, we want to, shape the future. And technology by nature is fast, Moore's law, network effects. So I think it's really important that we gain sort of the self awareness that it's legitimate that we act, even if we are sometimes slow and haven't understood everything in every detail, but act on a matter of principle as to what constitutes a society, a marketplace, a democracy. and that we're willing to do that, I find it, 100% legitimate, because we have done it before. This was also the case with the first industrial revolution, also for those days, really fast changes. And yet, eventually, we managed to get, the working hours right, to get the children out of the factories and into schools, to get the working environment on dangerous substances right, to protect nature against all the pollution. So we have done it before. This assertively saying it's legitimate, our democracies, we will do this. And I think that is the push that we need, not to scare off because it's fast and it's difficult to see through.
To that point, what is if you could pick the one thing that needs to happen in order to ensure that we do reach those agreements and we do think about the kind of fundamental bringing together of democracies in the right way, what are the conditions? Do we have the right conditions now? Are there things you think that we need to do more of? How do we make sure that we do take the examples of the past and make sure we do build them for the future, which I realise is a huge part of your job now?
Well, obviously really difficult, but there is a fundamental thing about politicians, and it is that just as well as they inspire voters, voters also inspire politicians. So I think it's really important that more people take an interest. Just as back in the days where the unions played a really important role in getting the working conditions right in the factories, I think here, both in our role as citizens, as consumers, as workers or entrepreneurs, that we use our voice. And this is one of the reasons why digital skills is such a hard strategic priority, because it's really difficult to make claims about things that you do not understand at all and that you feel estranged towards. So if I could wish for one thing, it would be that there was a different awareness that it's now that we should take action to make sure that our societies get the right direction, and that digital technology is a tool, and we should use it in the best possible way, because all of a sudden we may actually fulfill some of all these promises given over the years of access to education, of world-class healthcare, of unpolluted cities, of fighting climate change. But it's not just something done by politicians in closed rooms. It is something that needs also the demand from voters. I have learned a bit of lip reading over these 14 months, but right now, actually, I don't hear you.
Yeah, there we go. Someone was muting me, excuse me. New skill of lip reading. I was just returning, just before we move on, to the question of China, I think, versus US, Europe, and the fundamental, whether we like it or not, we are in a competition in some ways for what the value systems and the ethics around so many things are, particularly around AI. Do you see the right levels of investment in Europe and in the US, I guess it's slightly separate, but in Europe, to be able to build the same kind of AI systems and expertise and institutional ability to compete with China? Because clearly this is the next wave.
Yes, we should build better systems, different systems. We should find all the places where AI in all its various forms could help out. And for that, we need more investments. And it's not done with public funding. There must be a strong, also private response to these calls. And that can be managed if businesses also get the ambition themselves to use more AI and to sort of reinvent the business logic. because then you get a different demand for AI solutions. I think one of the things that will happen over the coming years is that these really big European public sectors will use much more e-governance, e-government. And because of that, there will be a demand for new solutions. And that can be a market push.
Yeah.
And hopefully with that, also following investments. We have some funding for artificial intelligence, both in the Horizon Europe program, but also in the Digital Europe program. But we need private sector on board also to make sure that we get the most far-reaching use of artificial intelligence, that we really embrace it, knowing that we can trust what the technology will deliver.
Yes. Yes, and yet again, it kind of returns in my mind to partly to legislators and officials' ability to understand the horizon and the landscape and bring the right parties together and then legislate or not around it, which is complex. You know, I'm meant to work in this sector and I don't understand anything that's going on. It's hard to keep abreast of things, isn't it? And to understand them in enough depth. I mean, moving slightly away from the topics of regulation and competition and so on, you know, you are extremely inspiring, shining light in the horizon of people that understand this, and who is also a woman. And I don't want to just dwell too much on diversity, but I was really struck listening last week to a podcast about the space race. You know, Bezos just announced he's launching into space. Could be a great thing for the planet. And I was constantly amazed again about how even the future of up in the sky seems to be dominated by white men. And although, you know, I've spent my whole career in technology as a relatively young woman, not anymore, and you clearly have built an amazing career in the spheres you've chosen. How do you feel now about the diversity challenge in our sectors, and do you see any change?
Well, if you imagine a parliament with the same composition as the tech sector, I think people would revolt, because they would say, no, this cannot be, that so few women and men, more or less the same generation or two, should do something so influential over our society. And I think we need that kind of showcase for people to see that if we want to use tech in the best possible way, we need much more diversity. And this is why I call for this, to use passion as a lever. So that if you're passionate about farming, organic farming, well, then you should be offered courses to do your own robots to help you take out the weeds. That those who are passionate about teaching, that they should get many more sort of digital calories into their education, so that you can inspire from substance into technology. Because I don't think that we can be successful if it's just the technology in itself that you are to be passionate about. Because we have so many passions and our society is so rich. So if we really want to recruit, I think we need to be much more broader in how we approach it, because we're not anywhere done yet. There is still so much to do to have real diversity in these different work streams that is really defining our society.
My partner works in marine conservation, and we have this constant fight in our house. He's always saying, why are you going on and on about technology? The internet is not going to save the planet. You need to focus on the climate crisis. How do you, I mean, I think, and he does too, really, it's a dinner table kind of conversation, that they are so tightly linked. How do you see kind of the digital world's responsibility both for the climate? I mean, there's a huge amount right now going on about whether or not blockchain and distributed technologies and all of the things around cryptocurrencies are good or bad for the planet in terms of sustainability. But how do you see the link between how we're going to solve the climate crisis and what you're building, the digitally fit for the future.
But the internet is definitely going to save our planet.
Yes.
Because without the internet, you wouldn't know. So many people would never have seen a melting glacier. So many young people would not have been able to organize their demos. I think sort of the latest estimate I heard was that digital technologies will save us 15 to 20% of emissions over the next 10 years.
That's interesting.
Of course, tech will have to come down and be much, much more energy efficient.
Yeah.
But it offers an access to climate and to nature that people would otherwise not have. Access to organize yourself in a different way, access to deal with resources in a completely different way. We will never have a circular economy if it wasn't for technology, because we need, to be able to follow the resources around wherever they go, and that is not doable without technology. So for me, the two things really, really go together, because obviously there are no choices here. Climate change will happen if we don't act, and the development of technology will also happen if we don't act. The question is only if we will be the acting party as societies and as citizens, or we will just leave it to climate disaster and a tech dystopy.
Yeah. That's another reason why you need to come to dinner, Margrethe, so that we can have this conversation. You can help me build the case for my partner. We only have one more minute left, but a couple of minutes left. But I just want to end by asking you, if you look forward for the next 10 years, what are the things that you feel most excited about? I mean, what are your passion? You've talked a lot about how you need to find other people's passions. What are those for you?
I have so many to choose from.
Pick one.
But one of the things I'm really passionate about would be to be in control of your data, be in control of your life.
Yeah.
I'm all in favor of sharing. I love generosity, but you should know it.
Yeah.
You should know when you're generous.
Conscious sharing. Yeah.
Conscious sharing, because I think we have a right to be private. And that, I think, is a right for everyone, and it should remain that way.
And again, do you feel optimistic about this?
Well, I'm a bit disappointed in the market, actually. I had hoped for a bigger market response after the GDPR to help us manage, because we don't have the time for all these terms and conditions and cookies and what have you. We need a market response to help us out here. And there are some solutions, but not sort of that breadth of enthusiasm to say, wow, we will help users to get in control, to be able to enforce their rights.
Yes. And then just finally, I know we've probably only got about 30 seconds, but I feel as though everybody during this crazy time has discovered something about themselves that is perhaps a bit surprising, or have been doing things that perhaps they didn't do before. For me, I've been reading a lot of poetry. Short, you can lift your day with a small burst of poetry. What have you discovered that you have perhaps not thought about before the pandemic?
It's a really good time to have some free time for doing things spontaneously.
Yeah.
Not having everything planned.
Yes.
I will really try to keep that learning. And the second thing is, wow, I appreciate hygiene. I love all the hand washing.
I noticed you went off to wash your hands before our session. I
Yes.
didn't even shake your hand and you washed them virtually. Hygiene. Well, that's a fantastic note to end, a clean note to end on. I thank you for your time. It's been a really wonderful conversation. Good luck over the next few months with everything that you're working on, and thank you from everyone at CogX.
No, thank you very much for doing this. You are amazing, and I will be looking so much forward to that dinner.
Great.